long before the skyscrapers, before the banks, before the numbers danced on glowing screens, there was a contract, not of paper, not of ink, but of blood, a covenant written in hunger and sealed with fear. Debt was not invented by mistake. It was designed, sculpted by the few, perfected through centuries, like a cathedral to control. The first debt wasn't owed in coins. It was a promise of labor, a crop not yet grown, a life not yet lived, and those who held that promise became gods. Imagine a village. One man owns the grain. The others own only their backs and time. A bad harvest, a borrowed sack of wheat, and suddenly a family becomes bound, not just for a season, but for generations. Interest is added, then interest on the interest, and soon the debt grows faster than life can repay it. This was no accident, it was genius. The poor didn't lose, they were harvested. As empires rose, the game evolved. The Medici understood it. So did the Fuggers. So did the Rothschilds. If you lend to a king, you own the kingdom's future. If you lend to a nation, you become immortal. And so the ledgers grew fat with royal signatures, while thrones crumbled under the quiet weight of numbers. But debt was never just a tool, it was a mirror, a reflection of how value could be separated from reality. A man could own nothing, yet owe everything. A farmer could toil all his life, yet die in deeper poverty than he was born into. A family could work for a century and still belong to another. This wasn't criminal, it was legal, sanctified by laws written by those who lent the ink, justified by economies built on invisible chains. They called it credit, as if trust was still part of the equation. But there was no trust, only leverage. And as centuries passed, the names changed, but the mechanism didn't. Debt became a currency of control, more stable than gold, more addictive than power. And the rich, they stopped trading goods. They started trading promises. The system became the poor borrowed to survive. The rich lent to expand. Default is not failure, it is design. Because what matters is not the repayment. What matters is the ownership of time, of labor, of land, and of the soul. This is how debt became destiny. By the time the printing press revolutionized words, debt had already rewritten the world. The industrial age didn't free people, it quantified their servitude. Workers were not paid in wealth. They were paid in survival, just enough to remain indebted to rent, to food, to the train ticket that brought them to the factory in the first place. The rich built systems where poverty was no longer a misfortune, but a permanent condition, engineered, monitored, and priced. Credit scores, mortgages, student loans. These weren't innovations, they were refinements, tools that measured your obedience to the invisible empire. A number followed you, defined what you could own, where you could live, even if you could be believed. But the true brilliance of debt wasn't in control, it was in invisibility. Chains are obvious. Debt is quiet. It smiles in polished bank branches. It hides behind friendly contracts and patriotic slogans. It whispers promises of opportunity while stitching a leash around your neck. Governance, too, became addicted. Nations sold their futures in bonds. Paper lies traded in shadow markets, auctioned to the same families who once lent to kings. Now they lent to democracies. And democracies, drunk on war and consumption, gladly borrowed their own demise. You see, the rich do not live in the same calendar. They do not think in years, but in centuries. A student loan for you is a portfolio for them. Your 30-year mortgage is their monthly yield. Your crisis is their cycle. And when defaults happen, when the house of cards begins to sway, don't worry. The rich have insured it, collateralized it, split it into derivatives so complex that even the regulators who sign off on them do not understand what they're reapproving. But they approve it because debt is sacred now. It props up the markets. It fuels the machines. It is the engine of illusion. And everyone, governments, corporations, individuals must worship it to survive. And still, we dare to ask, why are we working harder, yet owning less? Why do prices soar, yet wages crawl? Why do we borrow endlessly just to maintain a life that never seems to belong to us? The answer has no accent, no flag, no face. It is debt, and debt has no mercy, only memory. There is something spiritual about debt, not divine spiritual. It haunts, it follows, it binds people not just economically, but emotionally. It teaches shame, it teaches obedience. It convinces you that you are the flaw, not the system. A young woman takes a loan to learn. She graduates into a world that pays her less than her worth, charges her more than she can afford, and tells her it's her fault. A father signs a mortgage, believing he's bought freedom, but what he signed is a pact with a clock. Miss one beat, and everything falls. This is not freedom. It is gamified servitude. You are not allowed to escape. You are allowed to refinance. The brilliance of the modern debt economy is that it no longer needs violence. You won't be jailed for defaulting. You'll simply be erased. You'll be denied the apartment, the job, the hospital, the dignity, quietly, digitally, without a face to blame. And while the poor are devoured by interest, the rich feed on yield. The same families that lent to emperors now invest in debt portfolios that package your rent, your car loan, your emergency medical bills into tradable securities. Pieces of your suffering bought and sold in air-conditioned rooms. They call it innovation. They call it liquidity. But it is a casino built on human exhaustion, where the house not only always wins, it designs the game, sets the rules, and owns the chairs. Even philanthropy is infected. Debt relief programs come with strings. Microloans marketed as salvation end up deeper traps. Foreign aid turns into structural adjustment. Nations sell off their forests, their water, their people just to stay afloat in a game rigged since the first ledger was carved. And what of the debt we cannot even measure? The psychological weight, the dreams postponed, the marriages delayed, the children not born, a generation living not for legacy, but for survival, trapped beneath compound interest that compounds despair. They say we live in a credit-based society, but the word credit comes from the Latin credere, to believe. What do we believe in now? We believe in the number on our student loan. We believe in the monthly statement. We believe the next payment will finally buy us time. We believe the system is broken, even as we keep playing. But belief has a price, and the rich know. As long as you believe, you'll keep paying. In the end, debt is not numbers. It is a story, a fable told in interest rates and late fees, in minimum payments and lifelong balances. A story whispered across centuries by those who learned that control is not taken by force, it is lent with terms. The old families knew this. The new elites perfected it. Tech moguls sell you subscriptions you forget to cancel. Banks offer credit cards designed to seduce, then strangle. Governments spend on wars they never pay for, while cutting from schools you can't afford to attend. And through it all, debt grows quietly, relentlessly. But here's the true horror. Debt doesn't die. It mutates. Today, your data is a kind of debt. Your attention, monetized without your consent. Your future, borrowed and sold by institutions you've never met. You become an asset class, a behavioral model, a risk profile. You don't owe money, you are the product. And the cycle continues. A child is born into a family, still paying off a home bought decades before. She will grow into a world where college is unaffordable, housing unattainable, retirement unimaginable. Before she has her first job, she will be in debt, not because she failed, but because she was meant to. This is how the system survives, not through force, not through votes, through inertia, through normalization, through a society where debt is so ubiquitous, we no longer question its purpose. And so the rich do not fear revolution, they fear awakening. Because if enough people stop believing in the myth of debt, stop feeding it with their futures, then the spell breaks. The house of cards collapses, the ledgers bleed red, the chains unfasten. But until then, the story continues. The bankers sleep soundly, the algorithms hum, the interest ticks upward, and we, quiet, tired, hopeful, continue to pay for things we never truly owned, in a world that was never truly ours. Because long ago, someone discovered that the most profitable invention in history was not oil, not gold, not steel. It was debt.